Some cases of hiddenness may ultimately be the result of us letting each other down, abusing a kind of freedom which God gave us for good reasons.
I'm sorry. Nobody on earth is responsible for, God revealing himself. It's God's responsibility to reveal himself. It's not Pastor Jimmy John's down the street. It's not anybody's responsibility. It's just not. It's God's responsibility. It's God's responsibility to not be hidden anymore. It's God's responsibility to let us know that he exists in some kind of way. It's not, one person letting another person down. That's shifting blame onto us. We've already got the Bible that does that enough. We don't need to further exacerbate the problem by saying, oh, well, if God's hidden, that's really your neighbor's fault for not showing you God.
Hiddenness, therefore, rather than making us doubt God's existence, should instead inspire us to grow intellectually, spiritually, and morally, so that we can help others come to better know and love God.
So Cameron has effectively taken the divine hiddenness problem and shifted it from God's responsibility to not be hidden, to be detectable in this reality in some kind of way. And he shifted the blame onto us, onto humans, because we're not doing enough to know God. And then we're also not doing enough to reveal to others that God exists, so that God isn't hidden. I don't understand why you would want to do this, because it's not God's responsibility. Like I said before, it's God's responsibility to be detectable if he exists. And the fact that he's not detectable is not like a strong argument against a general idea of God, but it's definitely a strong argument against a God that supposedly is a personal God that has direct interactions with people in our reality. Like, I feel like then it's a strong argument, but to suggest that we are to deepen our knowledge of God, and also, again, I want to call out this whole bullshit idea of becoming a more morally good person in order to know God. If you become a more morally good person by current societal standards, you are more than 10 times better than the God of the Bible. So if you're better than the God of the Bible, I don't know how becoming a good person or being a good person, continuing to be a good person, I don't see how that allows us to know God better. If by know God better, do you mean like we know how much worse God is? Like, as time progresses and our civilization goes progressively more liberal and more accepting of people and different kinds of people, like the more we move in that direction, do we have a better understanding of how fucked up our past was? Like, is that what you're trying to say here? Or is that what he's trying to say here? Like, I don't know. It bothers me that Cameron is saying that by being a good person will help you to know God better. And I just simply don't think that's the case, like, at all.
Despite these answers, it could be that some cases of hiddenness nonetheless remain mysterious to us. But perhaps this isn't too surprising. After all, God knows vastly more than we do. Just as it isn't surprising if a chess grandmaster makes moves whose rationale we don't see, perhaps it's not too surprising if God does the same. Of course, there are limits to this. If the grandmaster kept losing games, we might wonder if he was really that good after all.
It's not just that God, as the grandmaster of chess there, is losing games. He's just not even showing up for the game. Like, it's like you're sitting down to play chess and you're waiting on the other person to get there, and everybody's like, oh, he's already here, he's sitting in front of you, and it's like there's nobody there. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna make my move, and then I'll wait for God to make his. And then God never makes his move. I mean, he's just not detectable in any kind of way. How are you supposed to play the fucking chess game like that? Like, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to convince somebody else to get in the chair and make the moves for God? I feel like that's the argument that Cameron is making here in this video, is that, oh, well, it's not God's responsibility to play this chess game. It's actually this guy's responsibility to play the chess game for God, because apparently that's how this shit works. If he's going to make this analogy, you should really compare it in that way, that God is just simply not showing up for the game at all. And it's not like, oh, here's this chess guy and he's making moves that we don't understand, but we see how these moves, come together in the end. The chess player is just not even there. And that's the problem with divine hiddenness. It's the problem with all of this.
But the evidence for theism and the fact that we have plausible explanations for hiddenness in some cases gives us reason to trust in God's goodness, even when we can see God's purposes only dimly.
Trust in God's goodness? When I look at the world and I look at the Bible especially, I don't see goodness. I don't see any kind of goodness in the Bible or in God's inactions or anything that has happened really in the past that we could attribute to God, because there's nothing in the past that can't be more plausibly explained on natural explanations. And I feel like with the way that Cameron's kind of attacking this, he's attributing coincidental things or things that happen by happenstance to God. We don't know why this happened, but there's got to be a good reason for it. It kind of seems like that's the direction that he's leaning, because it's God's doing all these things and we don't understand why. We don't understand why, kids get cancer. We don't understand why kids are born with genetic diseases. We don't understand why people have to suffer through years and years of different diseases only to die in the end. We don't understand these things, but God knows more than us. He's a smart motherfucker, and so therefore there must be a good reason for it. This kind of reasoning causes you to rationalize horrible things that happen, and it makes you rationalize them into this is a good thing. I'm never going to be convinced by a faith that causes me to do that. I mean, it's never going to be a good thing that somebody gets raped. It's never going to be a good thing for a child to die. In any kind of way. Those are never going, there's never going to be a good reason for that to happen. If you believe in a faith that causes you to sit there and say that those things are good or that there's a good reason for these things, I think that you need to reevaluate what you believe in. Because if it's a faith or a religion or any kind of worldview that is any kind of respectable thing that should be believed, it's not going to cause you to rationalize that as good. Now, applying this to my own worldview, as far as why do kids get cancer or why do these bad things happen? In my own worldview, I don't rationalize it as a good thing. That's for damn sure. I don't sit there and be like, oh, it's a good thing that Jimmy was, molested by his priest. I'm never going to say that's a good thing. But what I can acknowledge is that bad shit happens, because that is how reality operates. Reality is amoral. Nature is amoral, meaning that it doesn't have any kind of care at all, let alone for how it affects us on this planet, this blue speck amidst all of this non-living shit. Nature doesn't care about how it affects us. So yes, things that are horrible are going to happen, and that's just the way that shit operates. And that I don't mean to be a bit nihilistic about. I'm not really being nihilistic, but I guess I don't mean to be like a Debbie Downer or anything like that about reality. But that is how shit works, and I think the faster you come to that conclusion and you stop trying to rationalize evil shit as good shit, I think that you can come to a better understanding of our reality. And so, I don't know. All in all, for this video, I was not convinced by the defense against the divine hiddenness argument. For one thing, it seems to me that he's more or less attacking this hiddenness in the idea that God doesn't answer prayers or God doesn't stop bad things from happening or something like that. Seems like he's more attacking that rather than the fact that we don't have any kind of empirical or direct evidence for God. That kind of is good evidence against an Abrahamic God, but it's not good evidence against a general idea of God. He doesn't really seem to be addressing that issue. The fact that we don't have evidence, he seems to be addressing the issue of, God doesn't do these things for me, so why should I believe in him? Which is a very niche way to understand the whole hiddenness thing. I believe the divine hiddenness actual argument extends past this. While it does include those inactions or those actions, I feel like the divine hiddenness argument actually expands outward a little bit into just any kind of discernible evidence for God. It doesn't make a lot of sense why God would be absent if he was the Abrahamic version of God. I don't think that Cameron really sufficiently disproved that the divine hiddenness argument is a problem. I think that there's still a problem within Christianity, within all Abrahamic religions, of this hiddenness that seems to be, common of God. And I think until we can actually have some kind of empirical or direct evidence that this God exists, that particular definition of God shouldn't be believed. If you believe in a God that is hidden, that's part of the definition, is that he is hidden, then this isn't going to be a problem. So all in all, not convinced by this video. I do appreciate all of the technical time that went into making it, but I feel like Cameron kind of missed the mark on it a little bit, at least in my understanding of it. But hey, I'm just one asshole on the internet.